Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to my stream, second stream of the Unreal Engine live series. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Let me know if I'm audible. Hi, Dupechooks. Thank you. I'm happy that you're happy to be here. Let me know if you can hear me. All right, cool. Perfect. Okay, so we are going to dive right into today's session, which is all about lighting with Lumen. So what the goal of today's class will be setting up lighting scenario for daytime and then for nighttime. We're also going to bring in our first person character and we'll be able to move around the scene. Now, the first thing I want us to look at are these, I call them warnings. So it says ray tracing geometry, always resident memory exceeds 20%. I don't want to get into this now until we get to the optimization section of this session, but to get rid of these warnings, if you look at the bottom, you see disable all screen messages to suppress. So what I'm going to do is at the bottom here, you will see there's a console command area here. I'm going to type disable all screen messages. So I'll just select the first one, press enter, that gets rid of that. So just to make our viewport nice to look at. Now, in last week's class, we brought in our assets via Datasmith and FBX, and just so that we could appreciate what we've imported, I showed you how to just bring in some lights quickly. So we're going to delete them, and I'm going to show you all the different light types in Unreal Engine and how they work, and then from there we're going to set up the day scenario and light and night scenario. But before we do that, I think this would be a good time to introduce the post-process volume so that we can start to see how it works within the scene. Now to do that, I'm going to click on this icon, quickly add to project, and go to visual effects. You will see post-process volume. This is like the Photoshop of Unreal Engine. Now the way it works is whatever parameter you adjust, whenever you're inside the volume, is going to take effect, and once you step out, it's going to go back to what it is right now. That's its default value. I'm going to close some windows which we've not gotten into yet. And once we get there, I will introduce that to you. So I believe this is how your setup was from the last class. Okay, let me also close one more just so that we are on the same page. Okay, good. Now the post-process volume has a lot of settings. By default, yours would all be expanded like this. It's quite a lot, but we would go through the most important ones as we go along in the session. But let me show you some of the things that it can do. For example, you see that we have this bloom effect, which is nice for certain instances. But right now, let's say I want to get rid of it just so that I can see my interior space better. I would expand bloom, enable the intensity, and set it to 0. Now nothing happens, and that's because I have to be inside the volume, right? Once I'm in the volume, the bloom goes away. Once I'm out, it comes back. Another thing I might want to adjust, let me see, something interesting. So let's say the temperature. I can enable temperature. Now if I drag the slider down, it gets cooler. If I drag it up, it gets warmer. And the moment I go out of the post-process volume, it goes back to the default. Now, obviously, we want this to cover the entire interior. So we have two options. Either we scale up the post-process volume, and as you can see, it's taking effect. But a better way, well, let's say a better way, another way we can do it actually is to scroll all the way down, and then let's see, Yes, we're looking for infinite extents on bound. The moment I enable this, no matter where I am in the level, it's going to cover the entire level. So this is just another good way of doing that so that you don't have to always scale this. Imagine you're working on a large project, scaling it would not be very convenient. So that this way we just have a constant view of what we want to have in our scene. Now that being said, there's one more thing I want us to adjust before we start looking at the lights. Now if I step out, you can see it gets very bright, and over time it adapts. Same way if I go inside, it's very dark, and over time it adapts. So this is what we call eye adaptation in Unreal Engine. Now this is good for when you're making games, um, but for ArchViz, a lot of the time you want to have constant lighting value so that the effects of your light, you can see them. If the lights always, if the intensity always changes when you move in or out, or even when you're in your interior, it can affect the intensity of the lights you put. So it's good that we have a constant value. And to set that up, again, I have the post-process volume selected. We want to go to exposure. So I'll expand that. I'm going to enable the metering mode, exposure compensation, minimum EV and maximum EV. I'm going to set the minimum and maximum to 1. This way we have a constant value. Now, no matter what, value stays constant. And the next thing we want to do is we want to adjust the exposure. So for now, I'm just going to leave it at, let's say 5. So that way, when we start adding lights and everything is, constant or consistent. Okay, good. Now we've set up the post-process volume. Still a lot to do on this, but it will make sense to go through those settings as we go along in the session. So right now I'm going to delete all the lights, and we're going to go through them one by one. So directional lights, height fog, sky atmosphere, skylight, and clouds. Cool. So we have an empty scene. To create lights, come back here to the create tab or icon, and we'll go to lights. I'm going to start with the directional light. Now there are two ways you can bring in the light. You can either click. When you do that, it's going to bring in your lights into any random place in your project. I don't want that. I'm going to instead click, hold, and drag, and that way I can drag it into any location in my scene. So I'm just going to bring this towards this end and rotate it so that it comes in through the window. Okay, now our directional light simulates the sunlight, and that's basically all it is. Well, I won't say all it's used for, but basically that is most of what it is used for. That's the intention of this light source. Now let's go through some of the properties. In our details panel, the very first one we have is intensity, which is pretty straightforward. The lower it is and the brighter it is, the brighter your scene becomes. So by default, it's set to 10, which is a good value to start with. Next is our light color. You can adjust the color of the light. That's that. Now source angle. Source angle is going to affect the sharpness of the shadow. So depending on what art direction you want, you can make your shadow soft, or you can make it completely 100% sharp. By default, it has a value of 0.5 something, so it just gives it a nice little smoothness on the edges. Now the source soft angle. The best way to demonstrate this right now, let me see. We don't have a reflection that shows. So basically, this affects the size of the sunlight in reflections. Right now, we can't see that. So maybe as we go along, I will come back to this. Then we have use temperature. Now, this is another way to adjust the color of your sun or your light. In the post-process volume, we had the temperature, and actually, let me reset this back to default. Okay, good. So the same for the directional light, but this time, if I go to the left, it gets warmer. And if I go to the right, it gets cooler, the reverse of the post-process volume. Next, we have affects world. So if I disable this, no longer affects the world. And we have cast shadows. So we can have lights without shadows, which I have never had any reason to use this option, but it's there just in case you do. A very nice and important one is the indirect lighting intensity. So right now we have the direct light into the scene. Obviously we have some indirect lighting as well because the light bounces on the floor, bounces on the wall, on the ceiling. So we have some indirect lighting. If you want to increase that, you drag the slider, and as you can see, the indirect lighting is increasing. That way we get more lights into the scene. Even though it's capped at 6, when you drag the slider, you can type in a value. So let me just go crazy and type 200. See, it really increases. So I'm going to reset. Again, we won't be going through every single thing, but these are the most important ones we will need for this class. Let me see. Yeah, that's about it. Now I'm going to delete this and bring in another light source. We have point lights. So again, instead of just clicking, whereby it can put it anywhere at random in your scene, you want to have more control. So you click on lights, point lights, and drag it into your scene. And that way gets where you want it to be. Now, a lot of the parameters are the same. So we have the intensity, we have the units. There are several units per se, but I usually use the defaults. The most important thing is that your units are uniform across all light sources, so that when you're making changes to the intensity, you have an idea of what those values are. Although the only one that is different, I'm assuming, is the okay. So even the directional light doesn't have a unit, so that's fine. So candelas is fine. We have the light color. Now, a very important one is the attenuation radius. Right now it's set to 1000. So what this does is, you can see this sphere around the light. This determines the extent to which the light has an effect on the scene. So by default it's set to 1000. If I bring this down, you can see that the light only goes beyond where this sphere ends. So it's very nice feature to have. If you don't want a light source to go all the way to a particular distance, you can adjust that. The next one is the source radius, and this again controls the sharpness of your shadows. By default it's set to 0. If I increase it, it makes the shadows smoother. Now, as you can see, it also gives the light a dimension. So let me reset this. If you want to have proper or better control over this, you can hold down control and drag the slider, and it moves much more slowly. So you can have better control, or you just type in the value you want. So this gives the light like a physical size, and that also affects the sharpness of your shadows. So let me just set this to 4 or 3, and you can see the effect. Let me just also reduce the intensity. Again, okay, good. So this is a good chance to show the source radius. Now you can see in the reflection, if I set the source radius back to 0, so this is the actual size. If I increase the, okay, sorry, not, if I increase the radius, it affects, you see the size of this light in the reflection. Now the source radius affects the sharpness of that light in reflections. So it's just for reflection. So that's good to know. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for being here. Next we have source length. So let me reduce this radius to something like 3. Now this will also, the source length will give the light, as the word implies, a height. So if you have like neon lights or any light that has this kind of shape, this is a good source of light to use. See, I'm going to reset that. Again, we can adjust the temperature, and the same thing, you can affect the world, or you can turn off affect world, you can turn off affect shadows, and again, you can adjust the indirect lighting intensity. All right. The next light source is spotlights. So I'm going to again click and drag, move this up a bit. So I'm not going to go through most of the settings already because they are the same thing. So we have intensity, the units, the color, attenuation radius. This one affects how far or how, yeah, the same thing, how far the light goes. So let me just rotate it like this. So again, if I reduce the attenuation radius, it goes down. If I increase it, it goes further. Now we have two new parameters, which is the inner cone angle and the outer cone angle. Right now, we just have the outer cone angle, which you can adjust. So if you want to have a bigger or narrower spread of the light, that's possible. Also, you can adjust the inner cone angle. Where I feel this is useful is if you want to have a sharp, if you want the light source to look sharp on the floor. So if I set the inner cone and outer cone angle to the same value, then you get sharp shadows on the floor. Most of the time I just stick to having the outer cone angle. Okay. Then we have source radius, the same thing for the spotlights, this as well. Source length. Typically for spotlights, I don't see a reason why you would need to add the source length to it. So, and again, you can adjust the temperature and you can adjust the indirect lighting as well. Okay, good. Moving on, let's go to the next one, which is rectangular lights. This is a very nice light source. This can be used to simulate lights from windows and rectangular lights. Let me just rotate it like this. Okay, it has a few new parameters, which I'm going to go through now. First of which is the source width and source height. Let me move this back a bit. So by default it's set to 64, but I can adjust the width and height. Now, the smaller the light source, let me make this very drastic, like 4 and 4, the sharper the shadows. But the bigger the light source, the softer the shadows. So that's the way light works in general. And then what else do we have? We have the barn door angle, which is this. So this is the actual, this smaller square is the actual dimension, and then from this outer one is the barn door angle. So essentially it's like, if you Google barn door camera, you see that it has this physical effect whereby it blocks the light from starting at where it emits, and it starts from where the barn door stops. So you can use this, as you can see, you can use this to adjust where the light starts from, and also you can also adjust the barn door length, and that will affect where the light starts from. So nice features to have. Let me see, you can also adjust the temperature, you can affect the world, again, indirect intensity. Another nice feature is adding a source texture. Let me see, we don't have any textures right now, but if I go to my engine folder, okay, content browser, then enable engine folder, engine content. I'm just going to search for texture, or rather, instead of searching, I'll use the filter and filter for textures. So I'm just going to use any random texture. Let me see. Okay, anyone. So I'm just going to drag this inside the texture source. And you can see you can use a texture to also light this up. Where this will become very nice or useful is when we get to the blueprint section, where we will add this light in front of the TV, whereby as the TV light changes, it also affects how it lights up the scene. So that'll be a very nice feature to have. So for now, I'm going to reset this, and then I'm going to reset the filters as well. So that goes away. Okay, good. Now the next, let me delete this. The next light source we're going to look at is the skylight. Now the skylight, what this does is it captures lighting information from the environment and brings it into the scene. But right now, as you can see, it's completely black because it by itself it doesn't produce any light. It needs to work with the light that it can see in the environment. So to do that, or to see this in effect, we need to add a sky atmosphere, and we need to go to visual effects and add a sky atmosphere. So let me do that. Okay, let me delete both of them. Come back, lights, visual effects, sky atmosphere. Let me see, why is that not working? Okay, that's interesting. Let me see on lit. Lights, visual effects. Okay, that's interesting. 1 second. Seem to be lost. Okay, all right. So let's get that lights. Okay, just to be sure. Oh, okay. So these are the issues. All right. So for this to work, actually, let's go back. I'm going to add the sky atmosphere again. So that's visual effects, sky atmosphere. This will not work without a directional light. So these are the things that you need to be aware of. I'm going to add a directional light, and voila. Okay, like I said, it's best to drag it into your scene and then rotate it. Okay, good. All right. Now for the skylight, I'm going to go back to lights, skylight, and bring it in. So as you can see, it's bringing in the blue sky that we have from the skylight. If I get rid of the, let me go to the outliner. If I turn off the sky atmosphere, well, I would need to reset this. So a lot of times it's just to delete and bring it back. As you can see, that there's no, doesn't bring in that blue effect. So I'm going to turn it back on. Again, I will just delete and undo. And you can see now we have the skylight coming into the scene. So this depends on what it can see in the environment. Without that, it won't work. So again, you would want to enable real-time capture. So I think, let me just confirm. Yeah, so that way, now when I toggle it, it affects it real time, and I put it back on, it comes on real time. So that's a nice feature to have. We have the cube map resolution, which I can't show you right now because we don't have things being reflected. So we get back to this as we move along. Sky distance thresholds. This determines how far the skylight looks to get information. Again, this will make more sense once we get further into the class. So one of the most important details is the intensity scale. So right now set to 1. If I want more skylights, it's quite sensitive. So let me just type in a number. I can type in 5, get more skylight into the scene. So essentially, the combo of your directional light and your skylight and your atmosphere is most of what we need to create a nice daytime scene for your interiors or exteriors. Okay, let me see what else. We have the color affects world. The one thing that doesn't work with your skylight is the indirect lighting intensity. This doesn't work, and that's because already this is, well, I won't say it's a bug, it's just the way Unreal Engine works. What you need to adjust is your intensity scale. So that's that. For your sky atmosphere, to be honest, these are set to real world settings. So unless I'm trying to achieve something that is not realistic, most of the time I do not touch the values here. So I'm going to get rid of all of these. And then what's next? Yes, a nice one is the HDR backdrop. So I'm going to click and drag and bring this down a little bit. Now what this is, let me zoom out so you see what it looks like. It's a dome-like shape, or half a dome, that has an HDRI, which you can project HDRI images, and that you can use that to light up your scene. So right now it's still very dark. Let us look at some of the settings. So the first one is the cube map, which is where we have, you can put an HDRI. If I click on the search, it's going to take me to the engine folder, and there are different HDRIs we can change. The same way, you can also go to your content browser, import an HDRI, and bring it here. For this class, we won't be using this, but this is an option to have. Now, for this to light up the scene, we have to make it slightly bigger. Right now, the size is set to 150. I'm going to increase this to 1500, and you can see it starts to bring light into the scene. And then you can adjust the intensity as well. Now, if you look up here in the details panel, you have the geometry, which I've showed you, and then you have the skylight. So basically, it's just a combination of these two. So the skylight is now picking the lighting information from this texture in the geometry, and that's what is being used. If I change this, let me go back to the HDRI backdrop. If I change this to another HDRI, you see that the lighting changes, and obviously you have the benefit of having a nice outdoor environment. So that's basically the HDRI in a nutshell. And then the last one, so I'm going to delete this. The last one is sun and sky. So I'm going to drag this in. Now, as you can see, it's extremely bright, but we'll go to the parameters. So the sun and sky is a combination of almost everything we've looked at so far. We have the compass, so you know where your north, south, west is. We have the skylights, we have the directional light, and we have the sky atmosphere. So like I said, these three things work together to create a nice lighting scenario. So one good thing about this, if you are trying to be precise in terms of real world lighting scenarios, is you can adjust your latitudes. Okay, first of all, let me adjust the north offset so that the light comes in through here. Okay, you can adjust your latitudes, you can adjust your longitude, time zone, the month, the day, solar time. So this is like, right now by default, this is like 1 o'clock. You can make it 2, 3, 4, 5, and then, why I don't use this that often is, as nice as these things are, I don't have direct control over how I want to position the sun. I have to work with all these parameters if I wanted to land in a specific place. This is good for, again, lighting study, and maybe you want to, yeah, get get how a place would look like at a certain day and certain time and everything. So that's nice. But for an artistic lighting, you want to have more control. So this is an option, but we won't be using it for this class. Another thing you would want to adjust typically is, if I go to the directional lights, the value is set really high. By default, what we have with our normal directional lights is 10 lux, and then this is like 75,000. So I could just bring it down to 20, and then this is close to what we would have. Okay, so we've covered all the light sources. Let's now start to build our level. Let me just go back to unlit for now. So we're going to build a daytime lighting scenario, a nighttime lighting scenario, and then we're going to have mood lights and then the ceiling lights, and you will see how we're going to mix them up to get different scenarios. So let's start. Now, instead of bringing in the lights one by one, which is, a valid workflow, what I showed you guys in the last class, if you just want to be fast about it, I'll go to window, I'll go to environment light mixer, Let me bring this out here. And essentially, this 5 just bring in the 5 things that you need to set up the daytime light. So we have, so let me go to lit. So we have the skylight. This won't do anything because there's nothing for it to bring into the scene. We have the directional light. We have the sky atmosphere. So it's now working with the skylight. We have the volumetric clouds, which by the way, you can find here, volumetric cloud, and then the height fog, which is this one, exponential height fog. So if I click on this, it brings everything into the scene. Now it brings everything into the scene at 0, 0, which is also a nice feature to have. First things first, let's do some house cleaning. I'm going to select all of them, including the post-process volume. With them selected, I'll click on this button to create a new folder, and I'll call that lighting. I like to have this as my first folder at the top as well, so I'll just put 0 underscore in front so that it goes to the top. And okay, good. So a few adjustments we want to make. Right now you can see that the inside looks a bit foggy, like there's some fog in the scene, and that is from the exponential height fog, and that value is the fog density. So the first thing we want to do is reduce that. It's 0.02. I'm not going to add another 0, and that will greatly reduce that. For an interior scene, you don't need it to be anywhere close to the default value, so that's nice. Let me bring the directional lights over here, and let me rotate it so light comes in through here. Okay, I think this is a good start. Let me just also separate the skylights. Okay, so typically when I start to work on my lighting, I like to let's say look at this scene in like grayscale. So just either I apply gray material to everything, but since we've not gotten to materials yet, and to save some time, what we can do is we can go to the lit mode and go to lighting only. Shortcut is Alt and 6. So this gives you a nice gray looking scene, and we can use this to test our lighting. All right. So like I said, having the directional light gives you the freedom to adjust where you want your light to land, and you can get very nice effects. So this is just my preference, all relative. Okay, so for the daytime, there's not much per se we're going to do because this is the basic setup. As we start to add materials later, we can start to refine this setup. But right now, this is good enough. I mean, we can play with the indirect lighting intensity, but right now I'm just focused on just doing the basic setup for the different scenarios. Okay, now I want to put some mood lights in the shadow gaps. I'm gonna have some lights here in the shelf area and then under the console, and then one as well for the kitchen backsplash. So for those, I'm going to use the rectangular lights. So I'm going to go to lights, rect lights, click and drag. I'm going to rotate this to face the right direction. Okay, it's way too bright, so let me try 1 or 0.5. Let me start with that. I'm going to reduce the width, something like 2. Also going to reduce the bound door length to 1, and then move this under. I'm also going to turn off snap so that I can move it much more freely. Okay, something like this is nice. And then I want to adjust the width, the height rather. Okay, that's fine. still too bright, so try 0.1, 0.05. Okay, I think that's even, let's go lower still. The one thing is that you don't want your artificial lights or mood lights to overpower the daytime lighting, which should be the most prominent light source in your scene. So you shouldn't compete with your daytime lighting. So set this. I like for my interior lights to have some warmth, so I'm going to enable use temperature and bring this down to about 4000. Okay, that's nice and warm. And I like this setting. I'm just okay. One more thing that's actually very important. So by default, like I said, you have every light has its attenuation radius, and this is set to 1000. It's always good to adjust it to where you need it to be, because right now Unreal Engine will be calculating this light source extending towards this area, and it doesn't need to. And the more lights you have in your scene, that can bog down your project over time. So always set your attenuation radius to where it needs to be. So I'm going to drag this down till I see it. Okay, so obviously this is too small, so 250 seems to be good enough. You can see that the light gets to the floor, so it now depends on how much control you want. If you don't want this light to reach the floor, then you don't let it touch. So maybe 200 will be fine, but right now it's not a bad idea. As you go along, I might want to adjust it. So that's that. One more important thing I forgot to mention when it comes to lights. In Unreal Engine 5, because we are using Lumen, all your lights need to be set to movable for the best results. So by default, any light you bring in comes in as stationary. We want to make this movable. A quick note on these lighting sources. So because we are using dynamic lighting, like I said, all your light sources need to be set to movable. If you were using baked lighting, this was in the era of Unreal Engine 4, you can still bake your lights in 5, but the downside to baking is it's almost like you set up a light source, you need to render the scene and it bakes the light. But the moment you move the light source, the lights will remain, and or let's say you cast shadows, let's say you are done baking a scene, the shadow that it makes will be baked into the scene. So if I move this chair, for example, the shadow would remain while the chair, you know and everything will look out of sync. So that was like the old method per se, which still exists in Unreal Engine 5, but from what we are working with in this series, we are using baked Lumen, which is dynamic lighting. So you want to set all your lights to movable. Okay, next, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to hold Alt and drag, and I'm going to copy this towards the console. Move this under. Move this towards the wall, and I can actually just go under and hide the floor so I can see it properly. And I want to increase the height. Now, because I've increased the height, I'll also need to increase the attenuation radius a little bit. So to unhide, it does Control and H. To hide is H. So quick tip, and might just increase the intensity a bit, so 0.05. Again, all these values are not set in stone. By the time we start to add materials, the lighting information might change, so we might need to increase or reduce certain things. So this is just the basic setup. Again, I'm going to copy it to the shells, so Alt and drag. Move this down a bit. Adjust the height. And definitely adjust the attenuation radius. So maybe 100. And then I'm going to move this to the very end here. too bright, 0.01 should be fine. And then make copies, alt and drag. Now let me show you another nice tip. So let me delete this. If I hold down alt and click, I can drag. I've shown you this. But while I'm dragging, I can hold shift, and while I'm dragging the light, that will also move the camera as well. So again, select the light, hold down alt, and then you can hold down shift and then drag. So that will make a copy and also move your camera while you're copying. So that's a nice, I use this every once in a while when I'm making copies like this. I'm not putting anyone here because it's just, the lights are just going to be under the shelf. This is going to be a wooden piece. And then we want to put lights in the shadow boxes. Let me see, what's the easiest way to do this? Now you can decide to work from the top view. It's not the most convenient. Let me go to wireframe. Because of all these lines, it's a bit difficult to see what you're working on, right? Let me go back to perspective. So what I'll do in this case is I will select one of the lights, or let me make a copy first of all. I will then select the ceiling itself because I want to have the lights on this edge pointing at the wall. So I will then isolate these two. Now to isolate, with them selected, you right click, you go to visibility, and you click on show only selected. Now that is a lot of steps just to isolate something. By default, you won't have any shortcut. I've set mine to Alt plus Q. Hello, I hope I'm going to pronounce this well. Abdul. Okay, Abdul. Let me just shorten it. Thank you for being here. Okay, so like I said, if you want to isolate, you right click, you go to visibility, and then show only selected. But let's add a shortcut to this so that it will be easier for us to use. I use 3ds Max, and the shortcut is Alt Q, so it just makes sense for me to use that. So to create a shortcut, we want to go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and then you search for the name of what you want. So that's Show Only Selected, and you should have added Alt and Q to both of them. Once you've done that, just close. Unreal Engine automatically saves it. And now if I press Alt and Q, it isolates the selections. Now you also want to go to Unlit so that you can see what you are working with. And I think this will be slightly easier for us to work with in terms of putting the lights where they need to be. Okay, I'm just going to go back to lit because I want to know that this is pointing in the right direction. So I'm going to rotate this to face the wall essentially. So set this back to unlit, and I'm going to adjust the height. Source height, increase. Once I won't bother with the attenuation radius now until I've copied everything and unhid, and I'll adjust each light. Also going to adjust the width. So let's say 5. All right, cool. So I'm going to make a copy, rotate 90 degrees, bring it here. Let it be as close as possible to this face, and then adjust the height. So straightforward stuff. Doesn't matter if it overshoots a bit. It's not that serious. Obviously, the more precise you are, the better. Make a copy. Put it in the center, and then adjust the height. One more thing, again, just to have more control, you want to hold control and scroll. That will give you nicer, smoother control. If you hold shift, then it goes much faster. So, another quick tip, make another control. I'm holding down shift and I'm also moving the camera while I'm copying the light. So, seeing it in action, increase the height. I think we have one or two more to do. Make another copy, rotate, and adjust the height. Okay, there's one more here. Why do I feel like I'm still going to miss one? But let's see. Adjust the height and bring it here. Okay, so I'm going to unhide by pressing Ctrl and H, and I'm going to go back to lighting only. That's Alt and 6. Okay, I want to just see what this looks like without the sunlight. So I'm going to click on the directional light and disable effects worlds, just so that we see the effects of the mood lighting. Now, first thing, let's adjust the attenuation radius for each because I want the lights to, get to the end. So I'm going to adjust the radius for each of them. Okay, this one seems to be okay. This one seems to be fine as well. I want to increase this. This one seems to be okay. And last but not least, yeah, this is fine because it might get to the floor. Now, one thing you'll notice is that these lights all have the same intensity, but the smaller the light source, the brighter it is. The larger it is, the dimmer the light gets. So you need to adjust the light intensity for each one to kind of like get something close to uniform. So this is too bright for me. I'm going to reduce this a bit, maybe by half. Then I'm going to double this one. So instead of 0.05, that will just be 0.1, maybe even 0.2. And try 0.15. Okay, this one seems to be fine. I think I'm okay with what we have for now. Another thing we can do is let's start to do some housewarming. I say housewarming, housekeeping. So I'm going to go back to the outliner. Let me just collapse all of this. So this lighting that we have, I'm going to change this to, let's say, lighting underscore day. So this is like the lights we're using for the day lighting. And these ones, I'll put them in another folder. So have them selected, create a new folder. I'll call this lighting underscore mood. So it's like our mood lighting. Okay, let me bring back the directional light. Okay, good. So I can turn this off and turn them on. Now let's work on, okay, well, let me see. Before we go into the night lights. So right now, what one of the things that we're going to do in blueprints is that we're going to be able to disable or rather toggle these lights on and off, right? And it will be a bit cumbersome, or actually it won't be possible if we always have to come to the outliner to turn them on and off. So I'm going to introduce you to a new window called Levels. We can find that by going to Window and you click on Levels. It's going to be a small window like this. I'm just going to dock mine under the details panel. So you will see that if you bring it to the bottom here, it will dock over there, and this is the next place to have it. You can have it anywhere, but I think for this class, I'm just going to have it here. So to explain what this does is everything we brought into this scene so far is inside the persistent level. So if I turn this off, everything disappears. If I put it back on, everything comes on. Let me just do a quick save. Let me turn off the engine content. Okay, good. So because we want to separate these mood lights, we're going to put them into its own level. The night light too is going to be in its own level. This daytime lighting will also be in its own level. So I think it's just best to see that in action. So I'm going to, let's first of all create a new level. So I'm going to click on level, create new. We want it to be an empty level because we're going to add these light sources into this level. So select empty, click on create, and we're going to save it inside the levels folder that we already have. I'm going to call this the same thing as the folder name, which is lighting mode. Okay, save. Now we have a lighting mode level. Next thing I'm going to do is select these lights, right click on the level and say move selected actors to level. Now once that is done, I can toggle off the level and then those lights come on and off. Now this will help us when we get to the blueprints to toggle this level on and off. So we have the mood lights in its own level, and for the daylights we want to remove this now from the persistent level. The persistent level typically should only host your static meshes. We want to separate all the lighting information. So a quicker way or another way of doing this, instead of making a new level and adding it, we can select the light sources we want to use. So let's say we have the directional lights, we have the skylight, we have the sky atmosphere, volumetric cloud, and exponential height fog. I'm not going to add the post-process volume because this will also be used in all scenarios. So with these 5 selected, I will click on levels. Now instead of creating new, we're going to create new with selected actors. So we are just doing 2 steps in one. Again, we have to save it in the levels folder. So I'll call this lighting underscore day and save. So right now we can turn off day lighting and we just say mode lighting alone, and then we can turn off the mode, and then we only have, so there's no lighting information right now in the persistent level. So I'm going to save. And the last thing I want to do now is set up the lights for the night lighting scenario. For that, I'm just going to turn off the daytime. I can leave the mood lights on. Okay, well, just so that we can see what we are working on. We have 4 spotlights, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have 6 rectangular lights. So one more important thing to notice, when you create a new level, that level becomes the new active level. So right now, the one we just made now was the day level, so that's why it's highlighted in blue. Anything I bring into this level now will be in this level. So if I bring in, let's say, a cube, and I turn off the day level, that cube disappears. So it's very important. And to make a level active, you just need to double click on the level. So by default, the persistent level is always active. But when you create a new level, or if you want to work on a particular level, you know double click that level to make it active. So for example, let's say I mistakenly brought in this box right now in the day level and I wanted it to be in the persistent level. What I'll simply do is select the box, right click on persistent level and move actors to level. So that way, if I toggle the day level, the box is still there. So don't stress too much if you make a mistake working on the wrong levels. You can always move assets between levels. So that's an important tip. Another way So right now I've shown you how to make a new level and how to add actors to the level. I've shown you how to select the actors and create a new level with them. Now this time we're going to create the level for the night scene. So I'm going to create new, empty, create. I'll call this lighting underscore night. And right now it's active, so any light I bring in is going to be in this level automatically. So I'm going to add a spotlight here. That's a point light, spotlight. Okay, bring this up a bit. Going to make a copy, hold down alt and then shift. And while I'm copying, I can also move the camera. Going to do the same thing again down here. Yes, the levels is similar to how layers work in 3ds Max. Yes, although we do have levels in Unreal Engine separate from layers. So let me just show you. If I go to Windows, we have layers. Now these layers are just for your viewports. They don't affect gameplay. Um, this will make sense as we go further. But yes, we do have layers, so you can actually put things in layers, turn them on and off. It doesn't affect what will happen during gameplay. And for example, when you import your assets via Datasmith, they would automatically come into your layers panel. So for example, we brought in the furniture Datasmith in the last lesson, and automatically it will create a layer. It will create the layer for us in the layer panel. So I mean, you can use this, but to be honest, with levels, you have most of what you need with your levels and your outliner. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's an option for you to use. So I mean, you can also dock it here and play with this. By the time we get towards the last class, you will now see what I mean by saying this doesn't affect what you are doing in the gameplay. So you know what, for now, I'll leave this here. When we bring in the other Datasmith assets, we'll come back to this. But yeah, thanks for pointing that out. So we have, okay, good. So I brought in the spotlights. Let me adjust the parameters. Now we can do that at the same time for the four of them. So I'll select the four at the same time, go back to details. The only thing that I wish was still possible. So let me show you what I mean. If I select one, I can come to the attenuation radius and drag the value. But once you make more than one selection, unfortunately, that feature goes. You can't drag, you have to just type in the value. So minor inconvenience, but it's what it is. So I'm going to reduce this to 300. Okay, I want this to hit the floor, so let me see, 400. Okay, that's fine. And we might, I think the outer cone, so actually it's not just the attenuation radius. Any value that you could previously scroll, that option is no longer there. You have to type in the value. So I think the default value of 44 is fine. Let me see, 50. The bigger you make it, you'll have to also extend the attenuation radius, but I think 44 is fine. I always like my interior lights to be a bit warm. The mood lights can be warmer. We might come back to them to even make them warmer, but because I use a value of 4000. Okay, you know what? Let me quickly make that 35. So come back to the spotlights and let's see, put on enable temperature. I'm going to make this 4500 for now. Again, by the time we start to add materials and everything, we'll have a better sense of what the interior will look like eventually. Way too bright. I'm going to bring this down to 2. And then I don't want the shadows to be this sharp. So to adjust that, that'll be the source radius 5, maybe 10. For now, 5 is okay and still kind of bright. Now let me turn off the daytime lighting. Yeah, this actually too bright, so 0.5. Yeah, let's start with that. Okay, good. Put on the daytime. Now for the rectangular lights here, I'm just going to bring in, okay, you know what, let me just copy one of these ones, alt and drag, move this up. Just going to adjust the width or the height rather. Okay, and make copies. Okay, now another tip is, say I want to copy this tool now over to this side. The last light you select will be where the transform gizmo will be. So if I want to copy from here, I ensure I deselect and select this one, and your transform gizmo will be there, and I can easily hold alt and shift and make my selection and also move the camera. And then the last two are here as well, so rotate this like this, 90 degrees. Okay, now because I know that I'm always going to adjust these lights the same way all the time, I can just group them by pressing Ctrl and G. So whenever I select one, it selects all four. The same for the spotlights. Well, I want to give this to a different intensity than these other ones. I can group these two and then group these two. So again, let's come back to our outliner. It's always good to be organized early on so that you can easily find things. So I'm going to select all the ceiling lights and put them into their own folder. So lighting, ceiling. Okay, so just to be sure that everything is working the way it's supposed to work. All right, good. Let me turn off daytime and let's make adjustments to the ceiling lights. Now, first of all, obviously, the attenuation radius is way too small. I'm going to adjust that, and like I said, you can't drag, so I'm going to type in some values. Let me try 500, 600. Okay, I think that's fine. And I want to increase the intensity to, let me see 0.1, 0.05. Also, I'm going to reduce the temperature to 5500, so not white, but just like off-white, just slight hint of warmth. Let's see, for the spotlights, for now, let me adjust everything at the same time. I think 4.5 is fine. Let me see. I use 5.5 for the rectangular lights, so for the spotlights, let me use 5000. Okay. Let me see what next do I want to do. Let's play with the indirect lighting because I want, some lights to get to these areas here. So these two spotlights, I'm going to increase the indirect lighting. Let me try 5. Okay. And even these two, or all the rectangular lights as well. Let me see. Make this 3, 4. Okay. Not bad. Bad. One more light I forgot to add is, okay, this is going to be a light source as well, and I want this to be with the mood lights. So I'm going to double click the mood lights. Now eventually when we get to material, we're going to add a light material, so that will give the illusion of this pendant light being on. it will give some lighting in the scene, but it definitely won't be enough. So to fake this, we're going to use a spotlight, and you see what I mean. So I'm going to drag this here, move this in here, and I'm also going to increase the cone angle to, let's say, 60 and 55. And what I want to do is move this light up until just before the light touches the mesh. So now if I want to be 100% accurate, what I can do is select the mesh. I can click on location, go to world, and right click just in front of it and copy the world location. I can then come to this light source, right click here and paste. That way I am 100% sure that the light is in the dead center of this object. So that way when I'm moving this up, I can just move it before it touches the mesh. So something like this. I'm going to make some adjustments, intensities down to 1 for now. Attenuation radius obviously is going to reduce, and to bring that just before it clips the floor. So that's a value of, let me use 350. Source radius, yes. You're welcome, Abdul. I'm happy that this is very helpful. I'm going to adjust the source radius to 5 just to make the shadows a bit smoother. Maybe even more, because this is meant to be like diffuse lighting, very soft. So I might even go further. So just very soft shadows. And then funny enough, for now anyway, I think I might just leave this light to be white. Let's see how it looks as we go along. So with this, we've done our basic setup for our lights. Again, it's not set in stone. As we start to add materials, we will adjust the lights as need be, but just to be sure everything is working properly. So everything is off. These are daytime lighting. This is our mood lighting, and then our night lights. All right, lovely. Okay, good. One more thing I want to point out when it comes to levels. So like I said, everything that we brought into our scene always comes into the persistent level, and we've separated the lighting scenarios into other levels. And you will see that we have these green dots in front of them. What this means is, Abdul is asking, isn't there a way we can turn off the guides or helpers to just appreciate the scene? Oh, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Definitely. So if you press G on your keyboard, it hides the icons. That way you can appreciate your scene. One more thing, you can also press F11, and that will maximize your viewport so you can really see what your scene looks like. So thanks for that as well. Okay, so again, F11 will maximize your viewport, and if you press G on your keyboard, that can hide your icons just so that you can look at your scene better. If I'm not mistaken, so many shortcuts. Where is that shortcut in Unreal Engine? It's somewhere, but that is a shortcut, G. So thanks for that. Cool. So yes, as I was saying, with the levels, eventually when we want to run the game, you do that by, you're welcome. We do that by clicking this play icon. Now when I hit play, everything is black. You won't see anything, even though we have our lighting scenario set up. So let me explain why. The persistent level by default is always on. It's always loaded. And if when we had our lighting previously here, if I had pressed play, you would have seen this scene lit up. But because we've made new levels, these levels by default are not persistent. They don't. We need to tell it to show. So let me explain what that means. If I right click on the lighting day and I go to change streaming method, by default it's set to blueprint. And eventually when we get to the blueprint section, this is where we would inside our blueprints, we're able to toggle these lighting levels on and off. But if we want to at least have one of these scenarios to start up with our game, what we want to do is right click on the lights on the level, you go to change tree method and set it to always loaded. So typically by default, when you start when you play your game, you would want it to start with the day lighting. Now when I press play, you can see that we have the day lighting inside. Obviously, it goes back to your default lit mode. This is what, because we've not added materials yet. These other modes are just for preview for us to work. But once you press play, it's going to go to, your default lit mode. Now, the next thing that you can see is that we are flying around, and I mean, which is a mode you can have definitely, but we want to be able to walk around the scene like a human being would, and which is the next thing we're going to go into. And I'm doing this now because I think it would just be nice for you to have that, interaction now. This is part of what I was thinking of pushing towards we get to the blueprint, but I think it'd be nice for us to just have that now so that even before we start adding materials, you can start to move around your scene and just appreciate it. So we are going to set that up now. So we are done with our lighting basically. Like I said, we're going to make more adjustments as we go along. So to bring in or to be able to move in our scene, we need to bring in what we call the first person character. So let me show you what that means, what that looks like. In our previous class, when we made a new project, let me just try and simulate that now. Remember that there were several templates, and in the game template, you have your first person, you have third person, you have top down, you have vehicles, you have virtual reality. These are templates for these different modes, and it has things that just make it easier for you to work with. So what we want to do is we want to bring in the first person template into our project. So I'm going to cancel. To do that, first of all, let's go to our content browser because it's going to come into this content browser. To do that, we're going to click on add in the content browser. Now, just in case you mistakenly have maybe a folder outside this content folder enabled, for example, if I select temp folder, you see that this add button will be grayed out. Whenever you're bringing something into Unreal Engine, it has to come into the content folder. So either you have nothing selected or at least have your content folder selected so that this button is enabled. So I'll click on this. You want to go to add feature or content pack, select that, and now we're going to add our first person template into our project. Now, when it does that, it's going to bring in 5 different folders. Now, I wish, it would just bring in everything into one folder, but the way, Unreal Engine is set up and the way these folders are dependent on each other, that's just the way it works. So I will show you one and that tip on how to just quickly differentiate, your folders, because eventually our list is going to get, quite long, and you want to be able to find where things are as fast as possible. So I'm going to add to projects. Take a few seconds. So once that is done, we've added 5 new folders, which are characters, first person, input, level prototyping, and weapons. Now they are scattered everywhere, and it will be a pain to always have to look for different things. So what I would do now is with this folder selected, I would right click on them and set a color. So I'll just use green and say okay. So I know that anything that has to deal with the first person character will be in the green folder, and you can also color code any other folder that you want. For example, when we get to blueprints and I make a blueprint folder, it just makes sense to make it blue. So that way, so color coding your folders helps you quickly, find what you're looking for. All right. Now, what's the next step? Let's look at the first person character first of all. We go to the first person folder, go to blueprints, and this is the first person character. I'm just going to drag it into the scene. So let me also change back to my lit mode just so that you see the character in all its glory. This is what we're going to use to move around the scene, but we are not going to, I'm just showing you what it looks like. There's a better way to bring this into our level. So I'm going to delete it. The best way to make this work is we're going to go, I'm going to show you a new window again. I'm going to go to window. I'm going to enable, where are you? World settings. I will typically just dock this beside your details panel. Once that is done, the very first option, game override, right now is set to none. What we want to set it to is this first person game override. So there are two options. You can either drag and drop, or select this drop down, and because we've imported it into our level, you will see the BP first person game mode, which is this one. So I'm going to enable that. Okay, now that's step one. The second step is we want to determine where the character will start from in the level. Because right now, if I press play, it's going to start from where my camera is, but we want it to start from a good location, which I think will be the entrance of this interior. So to set that up, we'll go to create, go to basic, and click on player start. So let me also press G so I can bring back my icons. So this is what determines where you start the game. Now this arrow also determines where the character will face. I want the character to face forward, so I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And so when I press play, the character is going to start from this location. Now when I press play, we're going to have a problem. So let me show you. I press play. We start from that location, but obviously we are falling through our project. And this brings me to another tip. Now, depending on how far I fell, I have to, move all the way back. So there are two ways I can easily do this. I can just select the mesh either here or in the outliner and press F to frame it so I can get back to the top. And one tip I should have shown you guys in the first class is setting up bookmarks. So with bookmarks, you can, if you like a location in your scene that you want to always come back to quickly, or you might want to create a camera at that location, you can just you go to that location and press Control and 1. So you have 10 options. You can press between 1 and 0. So I can come here, maybe press Control and 2. Now to go back to the first location, just press 1 on your keyboard. I can press 2 on my keyboard. If I want to go, here, press Control 3. So I can cycle between them 1, 2, and 3. So obviously, if I press play again, and I go all the way down, escape, I just press 1, I can come back to the interior. So the last part of today's class is fixing this issue. And we are following through our meshes because by default, they don't have any collision. And we're going to add collisions to the floors, the walls, and any part that, typically you don't want the character to move through. So let's start with the floor. We're going to open the static mesh in a static mesh window. Let me go back to the details panel. There are many ways you can do that. With the mesh selected in the static mesh section, you can just simply double click and that will open the floor in the static mesh editor. So let me close this. The second way is I can search for it. That will take me to where it is in the content browser. Again, double click, it will open it up. But the fastest way is just to press Ctrl and E on your keyboard, and that will open up the static mesh. Obviously, it has to be selected, Ctrl and E, and that will open it up. All right, good. To add collisions is very simple. At the very top here, you see collisions, and we have different options. So let me just take you through some of them. We have sphere. Obviously, that will not work for what we are trying to do. To remove a collision, you can just simply come back here and click on remove collision. The next one we have is a capsule. Then we have a box, which is what we're going to use for most of the shapes in our scene anyway. So I'll stop there for now. We'll go through the rest when there's a mesh that requires it. So with this collision, I'm going to save. Now, when I press play, you can see that I'm not falling through the floor. I can move around the scene. Obviously, if I go beyond the floor, then I fall again. So the next thing now is to add collisions to the walls. Okay, so let's start from here and go around. I'm going to open this. It's very simple, straightforward. Sometimes can be a bit monotonous, but you know, it's what it is. Going to add a box collision, save. There's unfortunately, as far as I know, there's no quick way, unless you're using, you know, scripts or plugins, there's no quick way to add collision. Well, I won't say that. I would say just to have the best control over what you're doing. For example, when we were importing the meshes, if you remember, we disabled collisions. So because ideally you will see examples now where you might not want some collisions to affect the mesh in certain ways. So, and again, this is a small scene. It's not, it won't take too long to add the collisions, and you won't need to add it on every single mesh. So for example, and let me see, there was no point adding the collisions on this cutting wall because this wall takes care of this entire face. So things like that. When I come to this mesh, to this area, when I add the collisions on these cabinets, that'll be enough because the character is not going to, you know, jump on top of them or anything. So there are ways you can be smart about it. So you see what I mean as you go along. So I'll select this wall, Control and E to open, collision, box, save. Yeah, a lot of shortcuts. Don't worry, you will get used to it. It just makes your work faster. I don't. Okay, so let me ask: should I have been showing you where they are on the menu and not use shortcuts, or do you prefer? Should I continue using the shortcuts? Let me know. Okay, so the next wall is this one: collision, box, save. Now I want to also add collisions in the walls inside here. Now another quick tip: you can select through the glass, and I think the option is here. Allow translucent selections. If I disable this, I can select through glass, so that way I don't have to, you know, physically move in there. So again, T is the shortcut. If I press T, I can select through the glass and open, add collision, box, save, close. Same for these ones and this. Okay. I'll come back to this glass door. Let me see. Let's move on to the next one. Open, collision, box, save. Now, so far we've added a lot of collisions, and if you want to see how, which meshes we've added collisions, we go to lit mode and we go to player collision. Right now, by default, yours won't have a shortcut. I've added mine, Alt and X, so just to make things easier, but for now, I'll just click on this. By default, it's usually blue, so this will give you a good idea of what you've added your collisions to. So I'm going to go back to delete and continue. Okay, going to add collision to this. Collision, box, save. Let me check. Okay, good. This is another example where, or another reason why instances are important. Because these were instances in 3ds Max, once you apply collision to one, it affects the rest. This one obviously is not an instance because of this hole inside, so I'll open this one as well. Collision, box, save, and do for this wall. Now, because I've added collisions to this wall, there's no point adding a collision to this to the panels here, covers for that. The same way you can either apply it to this panel, but I will just apply to the wall instead. Collision, box, save. And with that, I believe we've gone around the interior. The last thing I want to do is this wall. So I'm going to press T again so I can select the glass. And so let me show you a few more tips. When I open this glass right now, I'm going to add a collision box. But as you can see, this will prevent my character from moving through the box. Now, you can have more than one collision in your mesh. So let me explain. With the collision added, I go to my select mode. If let's say you mistakenly deselect, you can just select it, go to your scale. I'm going to disable the scale snap, and you can scale this to match the area you want it to cover. And I'm going to press Alt to make a copy here. Save, close. Let's check out the collisions, and I think okay, a few more to do. I just realized. So this bump here, I'm going to add a collision, and then the floor inside here, separate from this other, from the one in the interior, I'm going to add a collision box. These are light sources, which I know we've not added lights here. By the time we add the tree, we'll come back to these ones and put them in the right levels. Now let's do a quick test. Also going to make my viewport bigger by pressing F11. Now I can move around, and you can see that I'm making sure I move towards the wall. I can enter here, come back out, and it works as expected. So you can see that it did not take too much time, and now we have proper collisions in our level. Now, depending on the kind of project you are making, especially if let's say it's a client project and you want to give this to a client, or someone to move around, if they are not very tech savvy, I would advise not putting collisions in the furniture, just so that they can have more free room to move around. The most important areas are your floors, your walls, but things like furniture, you might not want to add them. But obviously, if this is for you, for a presentation, or for someone that you know is tech savvy, then obviously you can obviously do that. So let's do for a few more of these meshes, and I'll show you some more collision options. So let's do for this dining table, for example. Select it, Control E to open. So far we've only done used box. Now we have 10 DOP on the X, Y, and Z axis. Basically, this 10 just means it's going to have 10 faces. Right now, a box gives us 6. I'm going to undo. And the X, Y, and Z determines the projection of the collision. So for a table like this, I want it to project downwards on the Z axis. So I'm going to use the DOP Z axis. And as you can see, it gives us 10 faces. If you count around this, you have 8 faces, then plus the one on top and the one under. Now, like I said, collisions don't have to be super accurate for what we are doing, because it's just to prevent the character from, colliding into things. So this is fine. We won't be going under the table, so we don't need to adjust this. But, in case you do, maybe we're working on a VR project or something where you need to have these collisions to be more accurate. What I would do in this case is, for example, I would scale this one, move it to the top. This is a live class, but after the live class, you still have access to it. So just go to my live tab, and you'll see it there. So I will scale this down, and then I can make a copy, scale this down again, and then scale it up. So it's a bit more precise. So I will just leave this for now. Let me see. I will scale this in just slightly. Okay, good. So again, to see your collisions, go to clear collisions, and we have that there. Let's do a few more. So for this sofa, I'm going to open this. Now we can definitely do a box collision. That works. Thank you so much, Red Bunny Classic. Thank you. Happy you enjoyed it. And so let's see. We can use a box collision, but if you want, final results, there are 2 ways we can do this. We can, like I said, you can have more than one. So I can scale this down. As you can see, it is very, very slow, and that's because this mesh is very, very dense. Let me show you how dense. Let me go back to the viewport. If I go to lit and go to, where is it? Mesh edges, compared to even this chair or this table, you can see how dense this sofa is. Now, I I could have optimized it in 3ds Max. I didn't need to bring it in this dense, but this is also to show you the power of Lumen and how it not Lumen, the power of nanites. When we get to scene optimization, I'll show you how to optimize your meshes. So in that sense, you don't have to stress too much about whether your meshes are dense in 3ds Max. In fact, it's preferable to optimize them in Unreal Engine. So, but then it does come with some drawback, whereby, for example, adjusting things like collisions can be a bit cumbersome. So just something to bear in mind. But for this, I would rather use something like a 18 DOP or 26 DOP. So what it just means is, again, a box will give you 10 faces. These three options will give you, sorry, a box will give you 6 faces. These three will give you 10. This will give you 18, and this will give you 26. So the more faces you have, the better it tries to envelope the mesh you're trying to add your collision to. So for something a bit complex, I would use, a higher DOP. So if I use 26, you can see that it tries to go over it as best as it can. And again, because this is just to prevent the character from moving through the mesh, this is good enough. So I'll save this. Let me remove the mesh edge. I'll apply this to this as well. Save. And last one. Okay, good. For this, I will use the Z DOP, so it projects downwards. As you can see, it tries to get the shape of the table. I'll leave this for now, and let's just do a quick test. F11 to maximize. And again, for something like this, I would not, just so that it doesn't hamper the movement or how you enjoy your scene, I won't bother putting it on the chair, but you can. This way I can easily just move around the table. I can't move on the sofa. Now, one thing you can see is that I'm stepping on the table, and I'll explain why and how to fix this. For now, I can still move through the chairs, which is fine. And as you can see also, I can't move past here. So collision wise, that's basically it. There's no point adding collisions to the ceiling because we won't be jumping out, even though the character can jump by pressing spacebar. So we want to adjust a few things about the character to make it more suited for ArchViz. One thing, for example, you don't want these arms to be swinging around while you're moving around your scene. It's a bit distracting. If this were a game or something else, or I mean, if there was a reason you wanted the arms to show, that's fine. But for most of the time, you want to make some adjustments. So let us do that now. I'm going to press F11. So I'm going to go back to the first person folder, go to blueprints, and double click to open the first person. So this is a very light introduction to blueprints. This first person character was made via blueprints. We will not be going, I'm just going to show you things to adjust when we get to the last class where we get more into blueprints. Then I'll come back to the character and show you a few other things. But for now, I want to just do some basic setup so that it will be suitable for, an ArchViz project. First things first, I want to disable the jumping. I don't want my character to jump. So, but before we do that, let's just go to the interface a little bit. We have your components tab on the left, which is almost like the outliner. We have my blueprint section, which I would liken it to the content browser. We have your details panel, and then at the very top, we have the event graph. This is where you set up all your coding or node logic for the blueprint to work. And then we have the viewports, which is where you see the character or whatever you're building. So right now we have the capsule, which is a collision. So this is what this is the collision of this character. Without this, even if we had collisions in our level, the character would fall off. So this is the character's own capsule collision. We have the, so that comes with an arrow which shows where it's pointing. We have the character mesh, we have two of them, and we have the first person camera. And lastly, we have the character movement, which is very important. All these settings here determine how the character moves around in your scene. So we're going to make a few small adjustments. First things first, we want to hide the hands. Or well, I said the first thing, we want to disable jumping, so let's do that. So we have the camera input nodes, we have the movement input nodes, and then we have the jump input. Essentially, I want to just disconnect the connections. To do that, just hold Alt on your keyboard and left click to disconnect. Now, whenever you make any change in your blueprints, you will see that this compile, initially it had a green check mark. So right now it's telling you that you've made an adjustment. You need to compile. So I will compile, click on compile, green check mark, and save. So let's test. If I press spacebar, it's no longer jumping. So that's good to know. Let's move on. The next thing I want to do is to hide the arms. So I'm going to click on the first mesh, and let's see, in the details panel, what you are looking for is visibility. I'm scrolling down. Yeah, so under rendering, you will see it's visible. Now this visible is in the viewport. What we are concerned about is this one under it, hidden in game. So right now it's not hidden in game. When we say in game, it means anything that happens during the gameplay, right? So we need to enable hidden in game for both of them. And just so that we don't see it in this viewport because we don't need it anymore, I will also turn them off. You can always reselect them back in the outliner or in the component tab for the blueprint, but essentially we've made them invincible in our viewport, and we've also made them invincible in the gameplay. So let me again, once you've made any change, always compile, save. I'm now going to run the game, and when I move around, the hands are no longer showing. Okay, so 2 or 3 more things to adjust before we call it a day. And before we go into those few things, a few more things to show you. When you are in the blueprint or any window that is not your viewport of your main scene, if I press play, it's going to create a new window which I can maximize. And to escape this, you just press escape and it goes back to the gameplay. But if you are in your main level and you press play, it's going to play from your viewport. Now, I personally prefer it to always play in a new window so that it always covers my screen, because I don't want to always click on play and then have to press F11 to maximize. Then when I'm done, escape, then press F11 to go back. So to change that behavior, I'll click on this button here and click on, and by default, it says selected viewport. We want to enable new editor window. So right now it's playing in a new window. I can escape to close it. You can see that the icon tool has changed. It's no longer just a play button. It's a play button with a window under it. So now once I click, it's always going to open in a new window, which if I press my Windows button, I can drag the window out. If you have a second monitor, you can dock it in your second monitor and do what you're doing, and you can still have access to your viewport, even though you wouldn't be doing anything until you are done, testing. So that is an option. So I'm going to escape. The next thing I want to adjust is the fact that we cannot move around tight spaces. Again, for ArchViz, you want to try and limit how restricted your movement is, and that's a very quick fix, and that is by adjusting the size of the capsule. So with the capsule selected, okay, sorry, I did not see your question. Why is the character mesh double? To be honest, this was updated in, so first of all, let me go back to rendering. Let me make them both visible. In older versions, it was just one character, and I know I've read the reason, but I can't remember, to be honest. I think one of them, you know what? I can't remember. I know one of them shows the hand animation, and I think the other one is for something else. I will try and figure that out before the next class. But there's a reason there are two characters. I just can't remember why. So I'm going to make both of them invisible. Okay, good. Let me carry on. Yes, so we're on the capsule. I'm going to, with it selected, go to the details panel, and at the very top, we have a radius of 33. I'm going to bring this down to 10, so it's very slim. Compile, save, and I'm going to test. Now I should be able to move through those tight corners. Like I said, you want to limit restrictions as much as possible. Well, there's no collision here, so that won't matter. So that's a simple fix for that. Yes, the one about the, you're welcome. The one about the stepping on the table. To fix that, let's click on the character movement. Now the character has a maximum step height of 45 centimeters, and that's why we are able to step on that table because of the height. Typically, I would just change this to 0 so that way it can't step on anything. So right now the table is preventing it from moving around. So that's another quick fix. What else? What else? Yes, very good. Two more. The first one is, as much as you are moving around right now, it feels a bit too fast for this small interior scene. If it were a bigger scene or an exterior scene where you need to move fast, this is fine, but this is a bit too fast for this space. You're not really going to enjoy or appreciate, what you're trying to showcase. So let's adjust the character movement. So again, click on the character movement. In the character movement working section, you see that we have a maximum walk speed of 600 centimeters per second. I'm going to reduce that to, let's say, let me try 100. Compile, save, and let me play. So now you can see that it's moving much slower. I think this is actually a bit too slow. 1 second. Okay. Can you guys still see my screen? Let me know. I'm having some minor interference. 1 second, guys. Okay. Let me know if you can still hear me and if you can still see my screen. I'll carry on for now. Okay, so where was I? Yes, that walk speed was a bit too slow, so I think 150 should be fine. Okay, good. So I think this is good enough. You can easily appreciate, what you are seeing when you move around. But now we've lost the ability to quickly, move somewhere fast. So let's, all right, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, good. So you can see me. All right, good. So let's fix that as well. We're going to do some small blueprints. Okay, now in game fashion, if you want to sprint or move faster, you hold down your shift, the left shift button. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to right click we're in the event graph. I'm going to right click and type keyboard. It's going to give you a list of all the keyboard inputs, but I will just type keyboard and type shift. And what I want is the left shift. So essentially, when we press the left shift, we want the character movement, that is the maximum walk speed, to increase. And when we release, we want the maximum walk speed to go back to 150. So how do we do that? I'm going to drag this character movement into the event graph. So essentially it's like creating an instance of this. And any parameter you can see here, you can search for it from this node or from this pin. So I'm going to drag out and search for maximum walk speed. So maximum max walk speed. So we have some options here, not crouched. We just have maximum walk speed. We want to set it. So we're not getting it. We want to set it. So I'll click on set maximum walk speed and then set it to, let's say, 500. You can always test and see. So essentially, when I press left shift, it's going to go to 500. Now I can just duplicate this by having this selected, press Ctrl and D. And then when I release, I'll connect it like this. It's going to go back to 150, which is what we have by default. Also, don't forget to connect the character movement to the target as well. So I'm going to compile, play. Now moving slowly. When I press shift, it moves fast. When I release, it goes slowly again. So that way you have your natural, slow, nice movement. And if you want to get somewhere fast, just hold down shift and you can move. Well, once you release, you move slowly again. So you can adjust the numbers, whatever numbers works for you. The important thing to remember is that whatever you set here as your maximum walk speed should also be this value here. And last but not least, in terms of this blueprint, you see how these blueprints have comments at the top. Let's also do that here. That way you can remember what your blueprint does. So I'll just select this, press C, and I'll type sprint. So that way, whenever you open this, you know what your code is doing. And the good thing is that you can just click on this and that can move the nodes around. So that's an advantage. Compile, save, and we are almost there. One more thing we want to adjust. You can see that you can easily, turn around with your mouse, but it can feel a little bit, what's the word? It snaps kind of fast, I don't like the way this moves. I want this to be a little bit smoother so that when you're orbiting around something, it doesn't just, jerk around when you're rotating. If you don't have good controls over your mouse, it can feel a bit, jerky. So we want to adjust how the camera moves or rotates. And to do that, we're going to go back to our first person character. We want to go to the viewport and we're going to add something to the first person character. The camera rather. So I'm going to click on the add button and we are looking for, let me just type spring, S-P-R-I-N-G. We want to add a spring arm. So click on that. You see that when you select it, you have this red line. We are going to make the camera, the first person camera, a child of the spring arm. So I'm going to click on this camera and put it on top of the spring arm. You can see it says drop here, drop to attach first person to spring arm. But actually, before we do that, let me check something. Let me see camera. 1 second. Okay. So select the first person camera, make it a child of the spring arm. That will move the camera back to the location of the spring arm. That's the endpoint. So first things first, I want to bring, well, let me select the camera and I'm going to zero out the location. I'm going to zero it out so that it's on the same level as the spring arm. And then I'm going to bring the spring arm up to where the camera was, which was about 70. And last but not least, I'm going to reduce the target length, which is default by 300, back to 0. So, not 0, just maybe slightly behind the capsule. So let's say 12. So this is almost as it was before without the spring arm, but the spring arm is there. So what the spring arm is going to help us do is make our orbiting or camera rotation a bit smoother. So you see the effect, you see what that looks like very soon. So a few more settings. I'm going to select the first person camera. We have an option called use pawn control rotation. I don't want the camera to use this anymore. I'm going to deselect this and enable that same feature on the spring arm. use pawn control rotation. And I'm going to compile, save, and play. Now, nothing is going to change, just to show you that the magic happens when you enable. So with the spring arm selected, we're going to enable camera lag rotation, or enable camera rotation lag. So I'll enable that, compile, and let's play. And you will notice that the camera now moves much smoother than before. It no longer has that jerky feel, so you can go move around your objects. It looks very smooth, very nice. So this just gives you a better quality of life when it comes to your interactive creations. And with that, I believe we have come to the end. Yes, like a steady cam, exactly. So that's exactly what we've done here. Perfect. So yeah, I think that is it for today's class. I'm just going to save this. So yeah, we've done a lot today. We have gone touched the different types of lights and their settings. We've been able to create different lighting scenarios. We've talked about how to create levels and set them up. We brought in our first person character into the level by adding the template, and we've made some adjustments to the first person character, and I've shared a few tips here and there throughout the class. So this is where we'll end it for today. In the next session, we are going to look at materials, going to look at how to create master materials and material instances. And so by the time we apply the materials to this level, then we'll then come back to our lights and see how to adjust them and make them look better before we go on to creating renders, animations, and then the fun part, which is blueprint interaction. All right, cool. With that, we are done with today's class. Just want to show you guys a few other things. So right now I am running another like a live training for Unreal Engine, beyond this YouTube class. So everything we've covered here plus a lot more for a much larger project, which is this is it. So I'm going to teach you how to create an interior and exterior scene as part of a larger project. We're going to look at lighting as usual, more blueprints, more interaction. This is like looking at how a large scale project would look like. There's a difference between working on a small interior scene and a larger project. So I'm going to dive deeper into so many things, and it should be good. So this is the animation, then this is the interactive section as well. So we go into the interior, go into the exterior, show you how to toggle, your day and night. So if this is of interest to you, you can check this out. It will be in the link in my description. So these are the things that we cover. We go deeper into a lot of what I'm teaching you guys right now in the YouTube channel. And then it starts by the end of September. And it's every weekend, twice a week, or twice during the weekend, Saturdays and Sundays. You can check out some of the other projects that I've done as well. Remember when I said that with Unreal Engine, you're not only confined to ArchViz, you can also work on in other industries. So this was one of the projects I worked on for an engineering company. So you can check that out. And yes, if you're interested, you can check it out. These are the prices. It's £249, but right now, between now and August 31st, I'm running a 20% discount. And if you're a student, you can get it at half the price. Also, if you want to pay in your local currency, you can also do that. So check this out and share with your friends, anyone that you know that would be interested in this. And last but not least, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, share the link with people, turn on your notifications so that you get notified for the next class coming up this by noon next weekend. And I think you're welcome, Abdul. You're welcome, guys. I'm glad that this, was good for all of you. Just practice and get ready for next week where we'll continue this session. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you same time next week. Bye.